All right, Latanya, we are ready to start whenever you're ready.
Okay, I think we're ready to get started. Okay, all right. Welcome everyone to the session. This is Navigating UDL Implementation in Higher Education. I'm Latanya Motley. I'm an instructional designer at Wayne State University in Detroit, Michigan. I also teach online myself. I teach at Southern New Hampshire University. I teach strategies for online learning. I'm also a UDL advocate. I present on UDL and I'm part of the UDL IRN program development. So we have this panelist session for you tonight that we wanted to present on UDL and higher education. We have some great experts to present tonight, and I'll let them tell you more about themselves. So I'll let Eric start. Eric is from the University of Tennessee in Knoxville. So Eric, if you'd like to jump on and tell us more about yourself, and then have all the panelists just introduce themselves briefly.
Sure. So thank you for inviting me here tonight. My name is Eric Moore. Like Latanya said, I'm a UDL and accessibility specialist at the University of Tennessee, where I've been for the past 3 years. And so I've been excited to kind of be able to work in the difficult environment of an R1 university, trying to get UDL planted there, and also trying to serve the broader UDL higher education community through the network and other ventures that we've been going on together. So thank you for having me tonight.
Thank you. Next, whoever would like to join, come up next.
I'll shoot. My name is Danny Smith, and I'm from George Brown College in Toronto, Ontario. I look at, even tonight, from two different lenses. I worked at the college as an administrator to support UDL implementation, and now I'm full-time faculty, and now I'm delivering it, practicing it in the classroom, and trying to share those learnings with other faculty.
Thank you. Joanna or Darla? Dina, I'm sorry.
Oh, sure. I'll go next. So I feel like I'm probably the newest member to the community. I don't know, but happy to be here. I guess doctoral candidate at Cal State Los Angeles. I recently got hired to help integrate more UDL informed practices at a community college in the North Orange County Community College District. So just trying to become more of a UDL expert. I'm sure that'll be never ending for all of us. Yeah, happy to be here. Thank you again.
Oh, well, glad to have you, and thank you for your interest in UDL. Next up.
Hi, I am Darla Benton-Kearney. I am a Universal Design for Learning curriculum consultant at Mohawk College in Hamilton, Ontario, in Canada. I've been doing this work formally in this role for about 3.5 years, and prior to that I was in our Accessible Learning Services department as faculty for 12 years. So I kind of came at it from an accessibility lens in higher ed, and as we've been implementing, have worked to move beyond that at our institution. So thank you so much for having me. I'm really excited to be here.
You're welcome. Thank you. And I believe we have one last person. Do we joining us tonight? Anyone else? Joanna. Yes. Hi, Joanna.
Hi, my name is Joanna Hodge, and I am a geologist. So I'm a professor of geology at Fleming College at the School of Environmental and Natural Resource Sciences in Lindsay, Ontario. I would describe myself as a UDL faculty champion and an incorporator of UDL into my practice. Or I certainly try anyway. I'm working on getting it in there. As Darla said, it's probably a lifelong pursuit. I certainly would not describe myself in any way as an expert in universal design, but I certainly have some interesting experiences in terms of implementation that I can share. So thanks for inviting me, Eric.
Excellent. Well, welcome everyone. I also wanted to mention we have some staff and faculty here that's going to be assisting tonight with the Twitter. We have Mackenzie here. Mackenzie, did you want to say anything? Not sure. It's okay.
No, I'm just really excited to participate tonight.
Thank you for setting up. Mackenzie does the technical part of it as well. So she's monitoring Twitter and online YouTube and things like that. So thank Mackenzie for that. We also have Alex here. Alex is the co-facilitator. I'll take you back to our pictures. And Alex, if you like, come up to say anything. It looks like your mic is off. You can. If not, you can also post it in the chat area.
Hey everyone, I will be monitoring Twitter, so please remember to post your questions with the hashtag UDLIRN.
Thanks. Okay, we'll go ahead and get started now. I'm going to turn it over to the panelists so that they can take us through their slides. Please feel free to post your questions. I'll be monitoring the chat area as well as the other tech support that we have on staff, monitoring Twitter. So if you have any questions, please feel free to post those. And you're in for a treat. I have reviewed the slides and it's excellent information. So stay tuned.
So I just wanted to begin by giving a bit of a conceptual framework to guide what we're talking about here with the panels today. So starting with the question of getting our bearings, how do we talk about UDL in the context of higher education? Next slide, please. So I feel like there's different ways that we can enter into the conversation of UDL. One of the most classic ways is to start by looking at the guidelines and point out these principles that guide our practice that we need to really be thinking about how we're providing multiple means of engagement, representation, action, expression, how we're providing students choice and flexibility in the learning experience through these research-based practices that align with these domains, these cognitive domains of learning. And networks that we talk about in UDL. Next slide, please. On the other hand, if we get too bogged down on the guidelines themselves, too often people feel like, well, look, I'm already doing some of these things, so I'm already doing UDL. So you don't really have all that much to tell me. And we feel that's not quite true. UDL, though it certainly draws from the guidelines, and we feel the guidelines are very important, that's not the heart and soul of UDL, in my opinion. You can go to the next slide, please.
Sure, it's a little slow right now, so just a second.
Okay.
Looks like it slowed down a little bit.
So often, in addition to talking about the guidelines, we also talk about UDL as a design frame, as a way of thinking about how we intentionally design for a learning experience for all of our learners. And so many of us have found the value of working with backward design, for those of you who are familiar with that. So basically, instead of starting with what textbook am I going to use and what, defaulting to certain traditional teaching styles and methods like lecture and so forth, we begin by thinking about where our students are going to end up in the learning experience, and then how we can clarify those outcomes and those objectives, create assessments that allow us to measure their progress towards or accomplishment of those objectives, and then finally begin talking about methods and materials. What I think UDL adds to that conversation of design is it really causes us to think about the variability of our learners first and foremost, and then throughout the process. So when I'm thinking about outcomes for my learners, I'm also thinking about what kind of objectives and outcomes are going to be valuable to the type of variable learners that I'm expecting in my class. When I think about how my students are going to demonstrate progress or mastery of the outcomes, I want to think about the variability that students are going to have there and give them options and choices that will allow them to more accurately demonstrate what they have in fact learned. And then when I design methods and materials, that can be very flexible. Again, providing options to the students and how information is represented, how they're engaged in the learning experience, both from the initial recruitment all the way to self-regulation, and how the students are taking action throughout the learning experience. So there's that design component. But then you have people like David Rose who take it even further. And he says that ultimately UDL is culture change. And this this really throws things into a very difficult to measure, difficult to pin down arena. It's not these 31 checkpoints. It's not even a design frame. It becomes who we are, our values, what we believe, how we feel about our students, about what it means to be an instructor, about what the purpose of teaching and learning is. All of this becomes transformed. And so how do we enter into this conversation as UDL? What we do, is it why we do it? Is it who we are? I think at the end of the day, it's all of the above. When we begin to see how these different components work together for the development of expert learners, expert teachers, and expert systems, it is about who we are. Because we are who we are, we take the time to design effectively. And when we're designing, we have excellent research-based practices and a really high quality matrix here for how we can understand them to put into practice in our classes. So I think as we talk about UDL, it's important to think about in those three dimensions, is what we do, why we do it, and who we are. Latanya, Mackenzie's pointing out she could take over the slide deck if your computer is not functioning.
Yeah, if you can do that, Mackenzie, it is functioning, but it's running slow. And I think that's because I'm running the camera as well. So yes, Mackenzie, you may want to take over the slide deck. It's just I believe it's gonna throw everyone off if I keep it running slow.
Sure. Can you see the slide that says UDL as, Eric?
I'm just seeing the guidelines right now.
Okay. So Latanya, I think you have to stop sharing your screen. Can you hit stop share?
Sure. Okay, I just hit it. I'm not sure if it's, there it goes. It looks like it closed Zoom.
Okay. Eric, can you see my screen now?
I'm still seeing the same screen I saw before. It looks like something's frozen.
Yep. All right. It still says that we're sharing from Latanya's screen. Sorry for the technical difficulties, everyone.
Latanya, it might help if you leave the Zoom meeting and come back. That will force you out of the share screen.
How are we doing, everyone?
All right.
Okay, so you can kind of see that how the layout worked there, going from the guidelines to the design process to, on the next slide, the who we are, our attitudes, our values, our support systems, twice apparently. Small error there. And then on the next page, I was trying to get to kind of bring it all together. So UDL is all of this. And so as we begin talking about UDL in the context of higher education, we need to find strategically the right place to break in so we don't overwhelm, but also kind of keep our eye on the larger picture of ultimately we are trying to change culture. If we are to be UDL practitioners as an institution, it does mean deep, significant change in the way we've done things and why we're doing those things. Slide, please. So another way to look at this is if we want to change people's behavior in the classroom, what actually happens in the classroom, the most immediate proxy to this would be their intent to perform that behavior. The next build. That intention can be broken out further, going back into attitudes. Attitudes and perceived behavioral control or sense of efficacy, and then also the social context. So this is the theory of planned behavior by Adgen. And so basically, if people believe that this is important, if they think that they can do it, and if they have a context that supports them, then we have the strongest indicator that they're going to intend to do this practice, and then it's going to go out into actual action. Go ahead and hit the next build. What we know from reciprocal determinism is that when people get that practice of doing something, that influences their attitudes, that influences their sense of efficacy, and that can all, in that cycle, develop for individuals the sense that this is working, this is something that's good that I want to continue going forward with. Kind of what we're going to hear from Joanna, I think, to some extent, that she got the start with this, decided she wanted to try it, she did it, and now it just keeps reinforcing her behavior that she can do this and that it's valuable. Go ahead, Mackenzie. There's a relationship between these things, between our attitudes, sense of efficacy, and our cultural context. Like, what do our administration, what does our school, what do our colleagues have to say? We influence one another. And so when we take roles as navigators, as leaders in this, we're trying to take our attitudes and turn those into visions. We're trying to take our sense of efficacy and turn it into missions, into actions and training, so that instead of just being influenced by the culture of how it's always been, we're trying to impact the culture, to create a system where this supports not only what happens in our own classroom, but what's happening in other people's classrooms as well. So the UDL guidelines, I think, are appearing there in the action and behavior, what we're actually doing at the end of the day. Next build. The design frame kind of spans that range from that intention to the action itself. We don't just do these things, we do them with intentionality. And the next build, our identity comes with our attitudes, our sense of efficacy, and the culture that we belong to. And so you can see each of those has a place and they all work symbiotically. We can't really just isolate any one of these three components of UDL. In this model, we have to understand that all of that works together to facilitate change for UDL and higher education. Next slide, please. So as we talk about the social cultural context, some research that we've done is to look at these 4 levels that I've been able to identify as far as where people are in UDL implementation in higher education. Go ahead, Mackenzie. So we've identified that this phase 0, where a lot of people are at this point, is a pre-implementation, where you have an individual faculty member or staff member who's learning about UDL, gathering resources and making plans. Again, you can see, so that's where I'm putting social context here in this table. Go ahead and go to the next build. Phase 1 is where we begin to see an individual starting to move forward with something. They're applying it in isolation or in relative isolation. So Joanna's not alone, but if she was alone in her practice, she would be at phase 1, that individual faculty who's doing it. Phase 2, you begin to see a network forming in the institution, either within a department or in a given small group of people across departments that are working together towards that. Phase 3 begins to become more systemic as a college or an organization in the university or the college is beginning to implement it as a group and saying the English department is doing this, our instructional design team is doing this, and it begins to inform our practice as a unit. Finally, phase 4 is when those structures begin to move up to a higher level. And we have systems in place where there's university or college-wide implementation, both in academic and support-related domains. Now we begin to see things like how we hire, how we promote and tenure, how we spend our budget and so forth is all built towards maintaining the momentum to keep this as part of our identity as an institution. Very few places are at phase 4 at this point. I know a lot of places are between phase 1 and phase 2, and some are up into phase 3. It's helpful for me to see where people are and to use this language consistently so that we can kind of talk about how does this particular college get from phase 2 to phase 3, and what are they working on now to push forward into phase 4. So that's language that we'll be using tonight as we talk about the social and cultural context that we are in currently in our institutions and what we're doing to push forward to the next level. Go ahead to the next slide, please. So I'll turn it over to Danny now with that context to kind of talk about what's happening at George Brown and how he's been influential to that end.
Oh, you're so kind. I haven't been influential. No. All right. My name is Danny, and that's my picture. To give you a sense of George Brown College, we're in downtown Toronto. 500 full-time faculty and 1,400 part-time, 31,000 full-time students, and that's across 3 campuses. We're broken into centers, and then within the centers there are schools, and the schools operate or the centers typically operate in isolation. We have a large population of international students and a boatload of full-time programs. We can skip to the next slide. Okay, so our journey started about 5 years ago, and I sort of came in on phase 2 in around 2017, and then again I moved into a faculty role in the past 2 years. So I'll take you through it from an administrative perspective and then from a faculty perspective. But in phase 1, what we call the individual level, you're working in isolation or relative isolation. The college actually sort of identified those isolated people and said, let's send you to a UDL conference. And it was the second Pan-Canadian conference to see if there was any momentum, see what people could learn and bring back to the college. At the same time as they were looking at trying to build people and people's skills, the college went back and said, they hired a consultant to say, where are we with UDL? Like, are there any practices that we currently carry out that fall within that lens? And the third thing that they did is we did analysis of our program review reports to glean out where is UDL in our program review process, and what are we doing well, and where are some of the gaps? So the first phase, from my perspective, was all about the investigation. What kind of people are interested in this and maybe even trying some of the practices out? What are we doing from a program review perspective? And largely, what is the college doing that could be seen as supporting UDL at the college? The second phase in the professional learning community, we sort of took the learnings from the initial investigation and we decided to have a test. So we had a pilot. 5 schools participated in the pilot, 3 faculty from each school. They had to focus in on one course, and it was really up to them to decide how they were going to integrate UDL into their selected course. Now, to do that, they were supported by a variety of service areas like the library, counseling, accessibility, technology, and a few others. And they also were paired up with a curriculum developer so that they weren't working in isolation saying, go do UDL by yourself. We wrapped around them all the support mechanisms that we thought were important to ensure their success. At the same time, some of the people that attended the first conference started to, test and speak and attend at conferences. The Teaching Learning Exchange supported UDL through new faculty or full-time faculty onboarding with a UDL sort of 101 training. We carried out the pilot, and we captured several learnings from it, and from a faculty perspective, what do faculty need, what do students need, and from the service areas, what do they need to really promote UDL. After that test, we moved into the implementation phase of what I would call it for phase 3. So we gleaned some learnings, and now let's start to implement it. Student affairs has really been the driver through all of this. It's the common thread between all 3 phases. And they hired an access and inclusion coach. The person is on contract, has been on contract for a little while, but it still shows that there is some appetite, some desire to focus on UDL and drive change institutionally. Academic Excellence has integrated UDL into their program review process, as well as their course review and course development processes. So when you meet with Academic Excellence and the curriculum developers there, you're going to talk a lot about UDL and how to wrap it in or weave it into your courses. The Teaching Learning Exchange, I think, has probably been, from a faculty perspective, the one that I see the most. They have ramped up UDL support. And so you can engage with them online or in person. You can attend a 101, you can attend, amplifying your practice in terms of assessments or what have you. They've started to launch some learning circles for open discussion. And they also facilitate Microsoft Teams groups. So here again, here's another way for you to have a water cooler chat or say, hey, does anybody know how to do this from a UDL perspective? Or here's a suggestion I've seen that has a UDL application to it. So I think I'm really seeing the teaching and learning exchange from a staff development perspective really promote UDL and support the onboarding of UDL among faculty. And all the while, I would suggest that some of the schools that attended either the first conference or who participated in the pilot have maintained their interest with UDL and are continuing to promote it and support faculty who are interested in it. So, there's a UDL conference that Darla and I are working on, and I can see that some of the schools that participated in the first conference and the pilot are sending their faculty to the conference. So there's a nice continuation there. Next slide, please. So 3 quick learnings for us. Number 1, secure institutional buy-in. So like Eric said earlier, like we're not anywhere close to phase 4 yet. And there's lots of visibility. The service areas are supporting UDL, but it's not entrenched at the college yet. We are focused on personalized learning, individualized learning, but UDL hasn't been woven into mandates and policies and things like that, or hiring practices, etc. So that's surely a key learning for us that we still need to get institutional buy-in. Support services provide support and increased capacity for change. And again, it starts somewhere. And for us, and from my perspective as a faculty, it's really been the teaching and learning exchange who has stepped up and said, we're going to support UDL and support the variety of faculty we have here and provide options, because don't forget, 3/4 of our faculty are part-time and may or may not be on campus on a regular basis. So having those alternate options like a Microsoft Teams site or online training is very valuable. And then create and facilitate opportunities for communication. This could be a drop-in. This could be just opportunities to chat with other people. I'm a part of a few little sort of side groups, and we talk about teaching and learning. We have to find those, facilitate them, promote them. A champion like myself, I'm always trying to share different tips and tricks, so trying to find ways to do that. And I'll leave it at that because I set myself for 5 minutes. Thanks.
Hi, everyone. Hi. Yeah, that's my picture. We can just advance off of that. That's all right. So hi from Mohawk College. I'll start with a little bit of context because I think that will be important for the next chunk. We would be a medium to large college in the Ontario college system. We have 3 primary campuses, and then we have some smaller campuses. Smaller being, let's say, for example, we have quite a large Indigenous population. We are very close to 6 nations, and so we have a polytechnic campus that is there for Indigenous nursing and a variety of other Indigenous focused programs, if that's what students choose. I would also say we are a blended learning institution. And when I say that, I mean that 100% of our courses have some kind of content delivery online. So that it cannot be a repository for content, it has to be delivery of content online. And so for the next little bit, when we talk about what we've done with UDL, keeping in mind all of our faculty have to be on our learning management system. So that has made some things easier and some things a little bit more challenging. We typically have a very high population of students with disabilities. We have a high population of international students, and we have a high population of Indigenous students. We also have a number of red zone districts in Hamilton. So those are students for whom they are coming from areas where they are not economically secure. And we have many, many, many first generation students. The other piece I would mention specific to UDL is, unlike a lot of institutions, we have kind of done it a little bit backwards. So again, some parts of that have turned out really well, some parts have not. So we can chat about that. But for us, our Universal Design for Learning implementation has been a top-down initiative. So it has not been kind of a small grassroots. Not to say that folks weren't doing it, but yes, as far as a big push for it, that has come top down. All of our implementation is forward facing, so you can access anything that we've done. We put it all on our Mohawk College website. We have UDL web pages. You're welcome to whatever is there. And I would say we are about 3.5 years into actual formalized UDL implementation. If I could have the next slide, please. Thank you. So phase 1, they hired me. What happened was they wrote into a performance review process for faculty that Universal Design for Learning was important and faculty should be doing it. Awesome. Again, lovely, top down, lots of support, which is fantastic, but no one to actually support them to do it. And so that's why my job was hired. Very quickly, we needed to get some resources together. So hence the web pages, designing some resources. I worked a lot in collaboration with Accessible Learning Services to start, looking at what are their most common accommodations and then using those as our target points for some Universal Design for Learning implementation initiatives that would be fast and easy for faculty to add that would also have a big impact in their day-to-day teaching. And then lots of UDL specific professional development. And then for phase 2, we created communities of practice for specific academic schools and programs. We embedded Universal Design for Learning in our program review process so that we were keeping tabs on it that way and asking critical questions to be able to target support to specific groups. We included Universal Design for Learning in course and program development meetings. So if you were a faculty member developing a new course or part of program development, you would see my face at all of those meetings to help you out right from the start. The other thing that happened, and it happened early on, and again, I think a little bit of a flip-flop, it worked really, really well for us. But I wrote a proposal for a grant, not thinking that they would actually grant me the money. But they did, and so we received $100,000 to do UDL specific research at our institution, really looking at Universal Design for Learning implementation in technology-enabled higher education environments. So that was really, really helpful. And then we really started moving away from UDL specifically to address issues around accessibility for specifically students with disabilities. And we started the shift to Universal Design for Learning broadly, looking at all of our students, particularly our marginalized groups. We have a number of them. And so really looking to branch that way. And then of course, more development of web pages and resources for folks. And I think for us, we're it's a bit muddy whether we're in 2 or 3. Thank you, Danny. Chat about the tool. So it's a bit muddy for us regarding whether we're in some elements. We're in phase 3. Some we're in phase 4, which some folks might feel like, oh, they're in phase 4. That's really great. Parts of it are. What that actually looks like in practice, does that mean that everyone is doing it? No. What I will say is we have shifted now away from UDL specific professional development. Universal Design for Learning is now embedded in anything that happens in our Center for Teaching and Learning. So any curriculum design, development, delivery, PD workshops of any kind, it's there. If you are coming and asking questions about the learning management system, online course development, you will get it from our educational technology specialist. So it is embedded in all of those things. Not to say that we won't go and do UDL specific things, we definitely will. And every so often we'll get a request for that, but they don't need to. They're going to get UDL content. The research project that we finished, we ended up with two kind of primary deliverables. One is a UDL standard for our institution. Again, it's online, you can have a look. And again, based on a technology-enabled higher ed learning environment. And the other is a UDL course assessment where faculty can go on and they can assess their own course for UDL elements. Whatever they don't have, it will give them targeted resources and then additional resources that they can follow up with. So some use it as a pre and a post test to kind of see where they're at. Some, it's a matter of, hey, I want to do more. And they might go through, evaluate a course, and then pick one or two things that they'll do kind of each semester to add UDL and continuously add UDL. We do have Universal Design for Learning embedded in all of our all the applicable policies. So we also have it in our strategic plan. We have it in our strategic mandate agreement with the province. We have embedded Universal Design for Learning within our learning management system. So if you are a faculty member who, great, I've got a new course, the template you would get has a variety of UDL elements built into it. And we continue to use the UDL research and the findings that we got from that to provide direction of where we're heading to next. And if you could advance the slide, please. Thank you so much. I can chat. I don't want to take up everyone's time. I can chat more about these. I did want to throw them in somewhere in case this slide deck was being shared. We've had some things go really well. The research has been really helpful. Embedding the UDL has been really helpful. We have really great faculty champions that we use when we're trying to get other faculty on board. That has been really impactful. Our Universal Design for Learning and its implementation is not mandatory. We can definitely talk about that later and why that was the right choice for us. May not be in all situations, but definitely the right choice for us. And I exist in our Center for Teaching and Learning, not within Student Services and not within Accessible Learning Services. So at our institution, Universal Design for Learning is definitely seen as an academic priority, and I rest with that group. We also have a lot of just epic fails, just epic fails. And so there were some things that I had underestimated when I came in bright-eyed and bushy-tailed and all very fresh. So attitudinal barriers, systemic barriers I did not realize existed. Lots of confusion between some of our legislation for individuals with disabilities that we have here in Ontario and Universal Design for Learning, and the confusion between those two and the problems that it has led to. All good talking points in the end, but UDL specific professional development and moving away from that has been really helpful for us. And we have lots of concerns around compliance and mandating UDL when we first started. So we've had to do a lot of reframing around, you're going to come to UDL because it makes glorious and wonderful and perfect sense for the higher education environment. You aren't going to come to it because we've told you that you have to or that it's mandatory. You're going to come because it makes great sense. So don't worry about compliance. No one's going to police it. No one's going to check, but you still want to do it because it's going to be great. And I think that's me done. Yes, thank you.
All right, I'll be brief for this time, I promise. Where I work is very different from some of the others. It's a very large university, about 30,000 students, undergraduate students, and then many more graduate and doctoral students. It's a flagship public university for the whole state of Tennessee, and it is a high research output university. And so what that means is that we often talk about how important teaching and learning is, but there's nothing that reinforces that importance in terms of tenure, promotion, hiring, all of that, where we tend to be looking at publications, at how often you're publishing, how many grants you're pulling in, that type of thing. And sometimes that pressure to publish, to write grants and so forth takes away from time that people would otherwise invest in quality teaching and learning. A lot of the faculty that I work with say they really want to be better teachers, but honestly, they just don't have time. So that's the big barrier that I work with in this context. Next slide, please. But I was hired in 2017 to be the UDL navigator at UT, and it's really been one long experiment here. Is it possible? Can we get UDL going in this type of institution? So I started by really finding, commissioning, or creating resources that would help support people as they began getting on board, I was very optimistic in that way. And so one of the first things that I created was the UDL on Canvas course, which you can see linked there. I wanted to build relationships. I felt like if I was going to make a difference in culture, people would listen to me only once they felt that I was somebody that had a relationship with them, that there was that we valued our connection first. And so I've really worked hard with building those connections with disability services, with student success, with individual faculty and administrators. And I began offering training and workshops for individual faculty who were motivated and wanted to begin doing this themselves. And I find that if you stay at phase one for very long, people just burn out. We really need to develop a sense of community, and so that's really what we're moving. We pushed hard over the last year and a half or 2 years to begin developing people who are working together for this vision. So the first group, the most natural group that I worked with was my own team. So I'm on an instructional design team in the university, and so we wanted to see UDL implemented through everybody that we work with as an instructional design team. We want the courses that we produce with faculty to be of the highest quality, and I believe that UDL is a great way to get to the highest quality. And so it was very natural for me to support the team and becoming practitioners themselves. And I feel like they've been very successful with that. It does integrate into what we do as a team now, but even then we only reach a small percentage of the faculty in the university. We've begun expanding the trainings and workshops internally and externally. Externally through things like the UDL Higher Education Network, the UDL Higher Education Digicon. If you're not part of that network, everybody is welcome to join through the UDL IRN. Internally, we did things like brown bag lunches with interested faculty, bringing more people out who just want to kind of hear what's this all about, without any sense of immediate commitment. For them, we wanted people just to begin coming together and seeing you're not alone in feeling like we need to be doing something more. You're not alone in realizing that pedagogy matters in higher education. And similar to what Darla was saying, I really believe that a grant would be very influential at this point. And so that's something we're working on right now. First, an internal grant. So the UT system, which is of 5 universities, they're putting forth a grant opportunity encouraging the university campuses to work together on something. And so I know at least one of our other campuses is interested in these topics. So we're trying to get that grant, which not only would give us some funding to partner with CAST and so forth, but it would also bring attention from very high level administrators that I have no access to what we're doing. So that's a strategic step. We're not at phase 3. We're in the midst of phase 2, but in terms of plans for next steps, where we're going with this, is we want to call for proposals from faculty in the humanities disciplines this summer. We're going to try to put together a college level or department level organization of faculty who are going to work together to become experts, to be becoming experts in UDL, and to support each other and to observe each other's classes and to do it as a part of a team. And so that we'll have that intensive training, the course redesign, the networking, the observations, and then ultimately those people will go back and continue to spread the message back in the college. So as we're going from a cluster of people in the humanities back to their departments and to continue to spread it there, our goal is to, within the next few years, have the College of Arts and Sciences be familiar with UDL and have a large percentage of the faculty there practicing it. And we believe that that will have high impact on the students who major or go through that in general education courses. So they're not just experiencing it with individual faculty, but it's being transformed in how they think of themselves as learners because they went through that program holistically. Next slide, please.
Eric, we had one question that came up while you were speaking about your professional development. We had a question about if your professional development opportunities were open to the university or was it open to specific colleges?
The professional development that I did in phase 1 and that I'm doing in phase 2, that's open to the university. So I have scheduled workshops and I have workshops that anybody can request at any time. And people can also just come request a one-on-one consultation with me. Of course, very few people even know what UDL is, and so they have no necessarily reason to come to me with that language. So what I've really tried to do is when somebody comes to me wanting to caption videos, I try to expand on that. Like, yes, I'll help you caption your videos right now, and we'll get that done. But let me tell you about UDL too, and how you can kind of expand on this
Yes.
to not just address this immediate issue, but to begin rethinking how we design learning to reach all of your students. And I've gotten a lot of positive feedback once we have that relationship and that connection.
Excellent. Thank you. And also, I just wanted to mention that Darla posted the link to the UDL course assessment inside the chat area that Danny mentioned earlier. So check that out. All right. We're moving on.
Cool. So I'm next. So my name's, I usually tell people it's Denia, like Gardenia, because I'm sure you saw the spelling. I probably have different, like 50 variations of my name, but it is a Spanish name. So it's Denia. Anyway, that's not important. So I want to start by kind of describing how I kind of got into this UDL realm. I was searching for a dissertation topic. I care a lot about the student experience, equitable practice. I have a younger brother who's 23, who's on the autism spectrum, just observed a lot. So one of my professors was like look into UDL. And I was like, okay. And then I just, like I presented on it before, but from a very like surface level, like these are the 3 principles, but diving deeper, connected with a bunch of UDL folks, like Jen from University of Kentucky, Eric Moore, Hillary in Maine, Adria, Louis Lord Nelson, Lillian, and everyone has been so helpful to help me like jump on board to just learn more about UDL. So that's my topic, and it's related to professional learning. I started, I guess, presenting at conferences on UDL. One was at the California Association for Post-Secondary Education and Disability. The other one was the inaugural DigiCon. So started doing workshops and presentations for graduate students and faculty at community colleges. And then I'm also a grad assistant, so I go take advantage of my staff status and go to our Center for Teaching and Learning and go to, their workshops and things. And WASC, that's the Western Association of Schools and Colleges. They're the accreditation body my school, I guess, has, and they recognize our center as a national model, which is pretty cool. And they started this inclusive teaching program with modules on Canvas, and they asked me to be part of the beta testing for the universal design module. Well, they call it universal design, but it also includes UDL in it. So just kind of want to give a little background. Like I said, I feel like I'm the newbie here. Slide, please. Okay, so that said, I did some networking, and I got offered this position to be a UDL project coordinator. So I'm definitely in phase 1, probably with everything, hoping for a phase 2 and 3 and so forth. The school where I'm just going to start kind of like observing. The way we're talking about it is we're observing to see how UDL things are. We don't want to scare people away. We don't want it to feel like an assessment. So it's called, this place I'm starting at is North Orange Continuing Education. It's part of the North Orange County Community College District. It's a 3-school community college district. At North Orange Continuing Education, NOCE, we have 32,000 students. And it's one of 2 existing non-credit colleges in the California community college system. Some of the programs offered are like ESL, high school diploma, older adult programs, programs for adults with disabilities. For example, there's a lab for students with autism. So I think that, yeah, thank you. So mine, like I said, newbie here. So they have universal design in the strategic plan. It's under their goal of equity to eliminate barriers that prevent students from completing courses and programs. And it's listed as introducing universal design principles to curriculum and facilities design. So basically, I think kind of like how Darla was explaining it, like nothing was really happening. So then they met me and hired me, which is great. I'm just right now observing, talking to directors of each program, interviewing the academic senate president. I'm going to interview students. I've observed a few classes, and I'm going to have a couple months to kind of develop recommendations, like a proposal that I would present to the academic senate, and then hopefully moving forward, we could integrate those. I know I played around with the phase 1, 2, and 3 like titles, so sorry. And I think that's all I got. Thanks for having me. I'm excited to see the work unfold. I think it's relevant and it's important, and the fact that it's in the strategic plan, the institution I'm at thinks so too.
Okay, well, I guess I'm up next. Sorry about that small catastrophe in my basement. Clearly, zooming from home, surrounded by my pets, is not a good choice. So I'm a faculty member at Fleming College, and I have to say that I blatantly plagiarized this slide from Darla with no credit. But just kind of to put Fleming College in context, we are quite small. We have about 6,800 students, and we have 3 campuses, 2 of which actually offer specialist programs. So SANES, of which I am a part, is the School of Environmental and Natural Resource Sciences, and we have an entire campus that is devoted to the environment and natural resources. And then we have a very small campus in Halliburton, which is the School of Art and Design, and they are just kind of off on their own little artistic tangent, making sculpture and horseshoes and blown glass and things like that. So like many colleges in Ontario, we have a pretty significant international component. We have about 29% of our students are international students. About 15% are first generation, and about 24% of them have some post-secondary education before they come to us. Now that is actually particularly true of my program, which is Earth Resources. I teach geology, and a couple of the other programs at SANES as well. So often what happens is students go through university programs, they discover that they don't have any practical field skills in the area of field science that they want to engage in as a career, and so then they come to us. And interestingly, we have the university students generally do quite well, but they often come with some very preconceived notions about how difficult or how easy they think college is going to be relative to university. And so it's a very different environment, and some of them struggle. We also have a large number of students accessing accommodations. I would say possibly 30 to 40% of our student population accesses accommodations for disability of some description. And I suspect that there probably should be more of them than that. So in terms of where we are in the phases, I am not, like most of you, sort of involved in the learning design and support team. So I would say that we're probably around phase 2-ish. We certainly have some push from our learning design support team. And we have a program that was established fairly recently called a new faculty experience, where newly hired professors go through a full year of faculty training. So universal design is a part of that. And that's a fantastic program. When I started 6 years ago, it was basically, here's how you log into the learning management system. Here's the slide deck from the person who taught the course previous to you. Knock yourself out. Tell us how you go. So certainly there is a lot more support. It is primarily driven by our learning design support team, and initially the push came from the accessible education group. So my personal experience is coming at universal design through accommodations, and I'll tell you that horror story in just a moment. But we're sort of sitting at the point where we have some faculty champions. We certainly have some early adopters who have pushed that process through. But there is a lot of resistance with the faculty still. And I think a lot of that is that hangover that kind of came from accessible services, accessibility and disability services. One of the really interesting things that happened at our college last year, we got a new president. She's been there for about a year, and she offered a retirement incentive plan. Really, I guess, with the idea of getting rid of people who'd been there for 40 years and were considered accessible documents to be PDF versions of handwritten, scanned images. So they're posted on the learning management system, therefore they are accessible and available to everybody. So I see your face there, Dala, but that is certainly what it was like. And so we do have this influx of new people who are going through this new faculty experience that is being led by our learning design and support team. And so I think there is the potential to really kind of ramp that up. We also have, along with the new president, we have a new strategic mandate, which does not specifically stipulate that universal design will be incorporated, but there is a push for faculty professional development. You know, isn't it shocking that if we have the opportunity to learn something, we might become better teachers? So, you know, that's a new thing in the college, actually. And there also is a mandate to increase inclusion and diversity. So I am hoping that we can kind of slide universal design into those couple of pieces of the strategic mandate that we have within the college, even though it's not explicit. So this slide here that you're seeing is that's just a nice visual of our demographics as opposed to the list that I showed you previously. So if we could have the next slide, please. So because I don't really have a strong perspective on where universal design is from sort of our learning design and support team, because I'm not in it, I teach about rocks. I thought I would just give you a bit of a guide or a bit of a conversation on my introduction to universal design. And for those of you who are sort of in the phase 1-2 piece, possibly let's not do it this way kind of example. So I first heard about universal design for learning when I had a student with very complex disabilities and some very intensive accommodation needs. Basically, I was hauled in front of a group of accommodation counselors and said, "What are you doing with your course? This person is really struggling." And so this was a student that was not in my lab section. I lectured to him, never met him in my life, had not seen an accommodation letter, never spoken to him. And all of a sudden it was, okay, you need to do these things by Monday or else. So it was very threatening. You know, AODA, which is Accessibility for Ontarians with Disability Act. So that's the act that that governs accessible everything, actually, including education in Ontario, was kind of thrown in my face. And, you know, if you don't do this, it's a human rights violation. And I was still a probationary faculty, and I kind of thought, oh my God, what is this UDL thing? And are they trying to kill me this semester, perhaps? And so it was very unfriendly. It was very threatening. It was, you know, that kind of management by fear style, which was pretty horrible. And I think that's why there's still resistance in our faculty members, those who, like me, were introduced to universal design in that manner. Do it or else, and this is what you have to do, and you have to do it now. You know, it's terrifying. It's like, oh my God, my sanity is going to just vanish from my life. So fortunately, I managed to connect with our learning design and support team and find out the actual truth about universal design. Firstly, that it wasn't terrifying and threatening. And I think the biggest, the light bulb moment for me was when I realized that it would actually help everybody in my class and not just the people with disabilities or who were accessing accommodations. And that came about when I worked with our learning support services to assist a student who had a brain injury and had trouble with short-term memory. We were actually looking at designing a memory aid, and came up with something completely different. It was actually essentially a key to assist with the identification of rocks and minerals. And I thought, well, hang on, this would actually work for everybody. Why would I make them memorize it when I could just give them some tools that would be very practical, and then perhaps everybody would learn what these things are, and it might stick. And so it sounds kind of stupid when I think about that now, but it makes so much sense now. It's very logical. And so that was sort of that moment for me where I sort of took that shift from accommodation to design for essentially everybody. So we are fairly well supported by our curriculum specialists and also our disability support service people. We do not have that top-down mandate explicitly. I'm hoping that we can fit those goals into our strategic mandate agreement for PD and inclusion and diversity. But I would say that as a college, we are still definitely sitting at about phase 2, with definite aspirations for 3. So did I make it within the minute, Eric?
You're good to go.
Okay, was there any other comments from any other panelists? Looks like we're right at 9 o'clock.
I would just point out, it sounds like we've all kind of, we have a lot of similarities, but there's also been significant differences in how people have approached it, from more top-down oriented or more grassroots. We have some people that came from disability services and others that came from teaching and learning and so forth. But what seems to be the unifying factor is that UDL grows when people come together with intentionality of moving it forward. So building that community is essential. Finding those partnerships that are able to move it forward, whether that's with administrators or other faculty or support staff on campus, to giving students voice and having them push forward. You got to find your strategy that works for your context, but bring people together. And as a community, you start to see the fruit being born.
I agree. Thank you all so much. This has been very inspiring for me, and I'm sure from our audience as well. We may have additional questions that come through. If we do, we'll send those out, or we'll post the answers to those. Thank you all for taking time tonight to just speak to everyone. I've learned a few things. I have questions, but we ran out of time, and I don't want to take any more of your time as well. So please, thank you again. Have a good evening. Mackenzie, is there anything else we need to do to wrap up for tonight?
Nope, that's it. Thank you all very much for attending, and thanks to our panelists for sharing their stories. Very powerful.
Yes, very good. Thank you all for being so passionate.
Thanks so much.
Thanks.